Hello and welcome back. Today we will try to understand the Linux boot process, that when you press the power on button of your server or your laptop, what are the sequence of steps that get involved, and you can see the login screen. So let's start. These steps can be quite technical, and if you do not have any previous idea about that, then it's okay, just follow me. You can understand these steps very easily. Starting from an x86 based systems, when you press the power on button of the server, the BIOS basic input output system initializes the hardware such as keyboard, mouse and display, and it performs some tests on the memory, and this sequence of steps is called post power on self test. The BIOS software itself is located on the ROM chip on the motherboard, and once post is completed, the control of the system is handed over to the MBR or bootloader. So in the next step, the bootloader comes in action, and bootloader itself is located on the one of the system's hard drive. In the old system, this is located on the BIOS MBR. In the newer systems such as UEFI based systems, located on the EFI partition. Up to this time, the system has not accessed any mass storage devices. So you can ask a question that this date and time always remain updated. So when, for example, if you power on your laptop today and tomorrow you power on it again and start your working, you see that your date will be updated. So how the date and time is remain updated? So the answer is CMOS values. This date, time and important peripheral devices information is stored on the CMOS values. This process depends upon battery powered memory. So even your system is powered off, your date and time remain updated. There are many bootloaders in the market, and the most common used are GRUB, Grand Unified Bootloader, and the second is ISO Linux, that is used to boot from removable media. Most of the bootloaders provide a user interface so that you can select the option that you want to log in. For example, if you have installed the more than one operating systems, so by using this UI, you can select the option 1 or the option 2 from which you want to log in. During this boot process, the important part of the bootloader is to load the kernel image along with the initial RAM disk. The bootloader typically operates in two distinct stages. The systems that use BIOS MBR method, the bootloader is located in the very first sector of the hard disk, which is called the master boot record MBR, and the size of MBR is only 512 bytes. At this stage, the bootloader reads the partition table and then locates the bootable partition. And when the bootable partition is located, the system then loads the second stage bootloader such as GRUB into RAM. System that uses the UEFI method. The UEFI firmware consults the built-in boot manager to decide which application should be launched and from which location. The firmware then starts the designated UEFI application such as GRUB according to the boot entry specified in the firmware's boot manager. The second stage bootloader resides in the /boot. At this point, a screen appears which is showing different options of operating systems, and once you select an operating system to boot, the bootloader loads the kernel and the selected operating system into RAM and handed over controls to them. Kernels are always present in the compressed form. Their first task is to decompress themselves, and once kernel is decompressed, it starts detecting and analyzing the hardware of the system and initialize the device drivers. The system reach at the point to initialize the RAM disk. The Initramfs file system image includes the programs and binaries that are used to mount the actual root file system, and it provides the essential kernel functionality for the target file system along with the appropriate device drivers for mass storages. A key component here is the UDEV, which identifies that which devices are attached to the hardware. It initializes the appropriate drivers for those devices and the drivers into the system so that the devices can perform properly. Once the root file system is located, then it checks for the errors and then mount it. Mount program tells the operating system that the root file system is ready to use and attaches it as a mount point. If this process is succeeded, then the Initramfs file system is free from the RAM, and now the init process is initialized from the root partition of the file system. If this process gets succeeded, the Initramfs is cleared from the RAM, and now the init program is initiated from the root file system. The init process is responsible to the mounting and switching towards the final root file system. Towards the end of this boot process, a text-based command prompt is provided in which you can give your username and password, and after login, command prompt is given to you. And in the system that uses the graphical user interface, these text-based command prompts are hidden by default, and the command prompt that is provided is the bash. And now the login process is completed. I hope you have learned this in detail, and don't forget to like and subscribe and keep watching me. Thank you.